Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Today's topic: I don't see a future with my husband. My husband and I have been married for 15 years. We have no children, no plans for them. We live in the house we bought when we got married. We always talked about the things we do living across the country, living in a big city, etc. Well, we have done none of that. Our house was supposed to be a 5-year starter house. However, my husband is extremely risk averse and doesn't want to move or try anything new. In the past 15 years, we have saved up a large amount of money. This is not to brag. He refuses to even look at other houses in our own city. There is always an excuse. Currently, we are waiting for the election. Just a note, the economy in our town is booming. Houses are selling in less than a day. I recently lost my job to COVID and I need to reset my career. This wasn't a big deal because we have a very large amount of savings. I'm very ready to move and start my life anew. I love him with all of my heart. I just don't see a future with him. We talked and talked. We've done counseling, nothing helped. What else can we do? I think if he's that risk averse, starting with something big like selling a home is a big ask. Is he willing to do some small things? For example, if you said to him, I made arrangements for us to take kayaking lessons together this weekend. Would he go with you and be a good sport about it? My spouse is similar. He's risk averse and kind of a stick in the mud. But I remember, before we got married, I talked about making a trip to Europe. I talked about it a lot, but I wasn't getting the feedback from him I wanted. Finally, I told him I'm taking a 2-week trip to Spain. I've been wanting to go for years, and I'm doing it this spring. His response was, what am I supposed to do while you're gone? I came to learn that his lack of enthusiastic response was actually insecurity because he'd never traveled before except for business, and he had no idea that my talking about the trip so much was me trying to communicate with him that it was something I wanted to do. We ended up planning a trip together. I took the lead, but he was a great traveler and a great sport, even when things went sideways. To a certain extent, adventure and change are driven by me, but when I present him with a plan and take into consideration his fear of failing, he pretty much goes along enthusiastically with anything I propose. Am I doing some of the emotional labor in this regard? Yes. But he's worth it, and the results have been worth it. Maybe this isn't where you are, but I hope it provides some insight. One thing I will say, having had a 5-year relationship with a highly risk-adverse guy, is to be aware that, if you take risks together, it tends to be you that gets blamed for the outcome. If you move, and it's not great, it was you that made him move. That made him spend the money, quit the good job, whatever. That's how they remain risk-adverse, kid themselves it wasn't really them that took the risk, they were forced. There needs to be a serious discussion about shared responsibility for joint decisions, so you don't end up with resentment, blame, and grudges down the line. If experimenting with small risks doesn't work out, might be worth considering how to attain some of the goals yourself, i.e., traveling solo for a period, working in a new city for 6 months, without actually breaking up. Or worst case scenario, go fully solo, if other options don't work out. I had one of these. Split after 20 years. I'm still in the starter house, the house I chose according to him. We never moved, because I wanted him to pick where and what he was comfortable with, because I did not want to hear about how we moved for me, or he did it for me. I'm now stuck in a town I hate, because I gave him the green light to choose whatever and wherever to make him happy, but he could never pull the trigger, because guess what, nothing makes him happy. He stresses over everything. He can't pull the trigger on anything. It takes him years to decide to spend money on something. It's not a life I want to live personally. I gave up financial freedom, but am happy now. My best friend is currently going through the same issues, but she has children. She intends to leave as soon as possible, however she is heavily dependent on her husband. She opened up to me, and we had set out a 5-stage plan that is personal to her requirements, but basically entails her becoming more independent and getting all of her ducks in a row. She knows that when she leaves she will lose friends and family, but is willing to go through that to find her freedom again. You only get one life. It's up to you who you share that with, but never forsake your dreams because of the fear of loneliness. Hi. There's a lot to unpack here. Do you want to just move into a new house in your city, or move to a whole new area across the country? If you're okay being the same city, you could always buy a small apartment in downtown where you can go relax once or twice a week. That way your husband gets to keep the starter home, and you guys can have a fun downtown apartment that can also become a rental property. Do you want to start a new career elsewhere? Maybe start job searching in your dream cities and see if you get a job. If you do, tell your husband you are moving. He can either come with you, do long distance, or you can decide to move on. If long distance works for your marriage, it's not out of that question to do that. What are other ways to add risk to your marriage/life? Maybe you both can go on more vacations together, or join a rock climbing group or something that adds an excitement while staying in the same home. Now if you're ready to leave the marriage altogether, then that's fine too. I would just recommend looking first into ways to make your marriage work for you both. You can't force him to. It has to be his decision. You should go on and live your life. Tell him he can join you or not. You're not going to let him hold you back anymore. This can be seen as an ultimatum. It is. But it's not like you're going out of your way to hurt him in retaliation, as ultimatums usually do. I hate it for you, just be living your life the way you wish, and the pain that would cause is not the goal of the decision. This may seem extreme, but you've tried everything else. Extreme options are reserved for when nothing else works. What does he say when you remind him of what you said when you were younger? Is he generally risk averse? Is this reflected in his career and other areas? Do you know why or what he's so afraid of? Could it be that your job loss rattled him? Are you looking to also upgrade into a larger, nicer home? Could he be concerned about an increased mortgage payment while you're not working? Or cutting into retirement savings? Are these savings earmarked for a potential down payment, or are they for something else? Are you involved in your retirement planning and budgeting? Do you know where you two are relative to where you should be? What is his specific concern related to the election? Could you try setting a date to look at places online together a week or two after the election? Or on Thanksgiving holiday? And are you just looking to move for the sake of moving? How long have you wanted to move? Is it possible that your job loss has sparked or escalated your desire for a shack-up? Maybe I'm misreading you, but you seem open to both moving somewhere else in your town or moving to a different area. Which is it? Do you know, say, the top 3 things you'd want in a new house or place, or do you just want to move? I know you said you've already done counseling, but maybe you could try another counselor. If the concern is strictly financial, maybe try a counselor that specializes in that area. Or a counselor specializing in whatever is at the core of his desire to stay put. Maybe he just likes the home you two have built together. Your post was pretty short, so maybe you have a good idea already, but I don't get a good sense of why he wants what he wants, or why you want what you want. I understand where you're coming from, but have you really thought this through? You have no job, there is a pandemic, and the economy is going to really suffer. Is this really the time to buy a house? It seems your need to start your life trumps what the family needs. I'm married 19 years, together 23. My wife hasn't worked in 20 years. She doesn't need to. We own our house and we have a lot of savings, but she would never throw a tantrum and or doubt the relationship because of something as materialistic as a house. So you just lost your job and want to buy a new house. What is your gamma plan here? Leave him, take half the money and run. Sorry, start a new life. If I was your husband, I wouldn't think now is the right time to buy a house either. And this is coming from someone who's 30 with 5 houses that will be worth over 2 million when they're paid off. I'm not risk averse whatsoever. But look at this from his perspective. Would you want to buy a new, more expensive house if your partner didn't have a job and you both were reliant on your income? My only advice is find a new job and come up with a plan together to buy a new house. Like when we have X saved up, we will start looking for a place in Y location. Also decide on what kind of house you would both want and what specifications you need, so that when you find out he can't just wheel his way out of the deal. I'm highly risk averse, so before we make big decisions like that we agree on how much money needs to stay in the emergency fund, how much the mortgage can be as a percent of our income, how long it can take to pay off the mortgage, etc. And once those things are agreed to, he works through any impatience he feels at the slower pace, and then I work through my inevitable last minute panic that this was all a mistake, we shouldn't do this. But if you have been through therapy together, I would imagine that you have had those conversations already. In general, is he willing to travel to new places / try new things? Does he invest in index funds, bonds, gold, or not at all? I'm not sure from your description if he is rational but risk averse and you could work together, or if he is caught up in vague / shifting fears of impending doom. 15 years of marriage, and it wasn't until COVID and she lost her job now she's bringing it up. And if you actually read it, it just seems like life didn't take the route that she wants. Says nothing about if it's a good marriage, it's a bad marriage, or anything else. She said she didn't see a future with somebody after you UC'd 15 years with, just because you didn't get what you wanted, or at least that's how she wrote the article. That's the impression I'm getting. You spent 15 years with somebody, you know a lot about them, and all she has pointed out is life hasn't gone her way, so you tell me. Would it be possible to rent your house out for a year and live in a different place? You might find that after a year of city living, you don't actually enjoy it. He might find he really does. Is his job remote now? Maybe you both could rent an Airbnb for a month and he could work, and you could travel in the new place. I feel like there are other options besides selling your house right at this moment. However, if your area is gangbusters, this might be the time to do it. Is he agoraphobic and won't leave his house, or is he just worried that something bad will happen and you will not be able to pay rent, as it were? Maybe you could double down on insurance or agree to have a certain amount of safety net. Good luck on your job search. If you've tried communication and you've tried counseling, but nothing changes, then you two have grown into an incompatibility. You can't force him to change, just as you shouldn't hold yourself back. It's okay to move forward in life without him. Maybe you two can have an amicable split and stay friends, or maybe you won't, but you should never shrink yourself to fit someone else. You've done counseling. Have you put divorce on the table? If so, what are his feelings on it? Like, the guy may be risk averse and figure counseling is just another thing, and if it doesn't work, then hey, maybe we'll try something else later. Have you had the conversation that his marriage is on the line and that if things don't change you will leave him? If not, it might be time to start issuing ultimatums. Ultimatums are a last resort, but this is the circumstance that they are made for. You're at the point where your marriage is about to end if nothing changes. The ultimatum is putting that into words. Things have to change in the following ways, or our marriage is over. If you've already done this, what has he said? Edit, I'm not saying go get a divorce. But Op is saying that, even though she loves him, she feels stagnant, that she doesn't see a future with him anymore, and counseling hasn't helped. Her not seeing a future with him is a pretty big deal. And divorce isn't a card anyone wants to see, and isn't one she has to play, but she might have to put it on the table. When it's a vague possibility, people can drag their feet, but some people can change pretty dramatically once they're staring down the barrel. Doesn't want to move or try anything new. The real question is, what do you really want from life, and from your relationship? You really think a house move would fix it? Or even something new? Whatever that is. My suggestion would be to first direct these questions inwards. What is it that you want, and what is preventing you from getting there? Just because you're married doesn't mean you guys are joined at the hip. If you want to travel, travel. If you want to move, then find a job in a big city and make it happen. He can stay, or he can join you. He might stay, or you know what? He might have just needed you to take the initiative and just make it happen, rather than just discuss it endlessly. And lastly, consider the fact that you might be using him as an excuse, or as a scapegoat. The responsibility to take charge of your lives lies with both of you equally. Granted, he has been a naysayer, but it has been 15 years. If you haven't done a thing either, then you need to take on some of that blame too. And I mean this in a good way. An inspirational way. You don't have to break up with your husband before even taking a step forward in that direction. All you're doing is giving yourself another excuse to have this big dramatic thing to happen before you do something with your life. Like I said, find a job, move, tell him your plans and leave him to his decision. Do your thing, and don't wait for some big event. Start right now. I empathize with your position, but my husband and I have been married for 15 years. Before we got married, we always talked about the things we'd do, living across the country, living in a big city, etc. Before you got married was almost a lifetime ago. You were both 22 and were no doubt very different people than who you are now at age 37. So I don't think you can really hold it against him for 37-year-old him not doing what 22-year-old him said he'd do. Is this really just about the house? Or is the house, and his lack of interest in moving or changing, just a bigger symptom of you no longer enjoying being married to him? Because this house is no longer suiting our needs, and we have enough money to invest in a new one is a very different problem to I'm bored of this city and have a plan to try somewhere new, which is also a very different problem to I no longer enjoy being married to my husband. I love him, but being married to someone who always has an excuse for why we can't do or try anything new is burning me out, and I'm desperate to leave this marriage. My stepmom had a similar situation with my dad. My stepbrothers and I were out of the house. She wanted to sell the big 4-bedroom now that they didn't need it and have my dad downsize his company that monopolized all of his time so they could travel and just generally move to a more fun, pre-retirement phase of life. She had a remote job, so that made it way simpler for her, while my dad's job required being there in person. My dad found all of that really scary and dragged his feet and wouldn't do anything to make his job less stressful or go on a trip with her or anything. She got fed up and just basically rented an Airbnb in Europe for 3 months and went by herself because she'd always wanted to go. She didn't handle it well, basically planned it behind his back and dropped it on him out of the blue and then bailed to the Netherlands for a while. It was pretty messed up, and I was pissed at how she handled it. They separated for about a year, but really missed each other, and it was a wake-up call for both of them. They sold the house, bought a smaller condo in town. My dad majorly downsized his company, she quit her corporate job, and they are just generally happier and less stressed. But in the end it took her just packing her shit and leaving to go live her life, because she didn't want to wait. And they love each other and made their way back to each other.